Hey everyone, today we're going to talk about the home front of World War II. Now that America has been pulled into World War II by the Japanese attack on the Pearl Harbor naval base, America has to get things ready to fight. To fight both in Europe with Great Britain and France against the Italians and the Germans, those totalitarian states, but also in the Pacific with against the Japanese Empire that has been spreading throughout the Pacific. But before we get there, we have to focus on what's going on at home. So, America, this time around, is going to already have an army that's substantial after World War I, but there's also a passion to join this war, unlike there was for World War I. Don't get me wrong, a lot of people wanted to join World War I, but Americans felt attacked and were literally attacked by the Japanese on their own homeland this time in World War II, and the enlistment levels were very high. People were volunteering for this war. So people were enlisting, signing up for this war. Thousands and thousands of American men, in total 16 million, are going to volunteer to enlist in the military. So many minorities are going to also enlist. It was a rallying call for America, not just white Americans, but all sorts of Americans. Black Americans, Mexican Americans, Native Americans, Chinese Americans. So many people saw that there was a villain this time around in these totalitarians like Hideki Tojo, Mussolini, Hitler, that they felt they had to get involved to stop this evil they saw going on in the world. So this signing up we call enlistment and volunteerism. And the reason why this was happening was because Americans were patriotic. They felt it was their duty to protect their country. They felt their country was literally attacked, and it was. So let's go through some things that Americans at home could do to support the war. Now, we talked about several of these things during World War I, and they're going to make their comeback during World War II. So the first thing are these government bonds, these war bonds that we call either war bonds, victory bonds, or liberty bonds. And what these are going to do is U.S. citizens are going to buy these bonds from the government, and that money that they gave the government to buy these bonds is going to be loaned to them. Essentially, the Americans are letting their government borrow money to help fund the war, to help pay for the war. So these war bonds, these victory bonds, help pay for the war. Now American soldiers will have more weapons, more resources, food, supplies, vehicles, ammunition, whatever. At the end of the war, or whenever, really, you could still buy bonds today. You can sell the bond back whenever and usually make more money. There's growth in government bonds, and you can make more money the longer you keep them in with the government. So, like I said, they go by a few names: war bonds, liberty bonds, victory bonds. They're all pretty much the same thing. And lots of propaganda is going to be created during this war to help convince Americans to buy these bonds. You buy the bonds, we do the rest. Save to beat the devil, buy victory bonds. Make victory secure, buy victory bonds. You've got a date with a bond, buy victory bonds. So also, since we need so many vehicles, weapons, supplies for this war, it's a war unlike really we've ever really seen before, World War I, we have to change our production in the country. Instead of making automobiles, those Model Ts, radios, refrigerators, whatever, we have to now switch from what we call peacetime production, when all that stuff was made, to wartime production. So instead of making those cars, a lot of these factories are literally going to be transformed into making vehicles, weapons, whatever for war, like planes you see here. So the same people, the same factories that would make these peacetime goods like cars will make planes. They'll make tanks. They'll make all sorts of things. Here's an example. The Willow Ford plant is going to build half of all the B-24 bombers that you see here that'll be used in World War II. You see tanks, the Sherman tank being built here in Michigan. So that's what we call peacetime production to wartime production. And a lot of the people that are going to be building these things are women. So many men are going to be signing up for war and volunteerism and enlistment, or being selected for service with the Selective Service Act, will also be working in these factories. But there was a labor shortage. So women are going to be called back to the workforce and are going to be making so many things for this war. They're going to make most of the weapons, the vehicles, the tanks, the planes, whatever, you name it. In total, 6 million women are going to join the workforce, which is more than ever had been there before, which comprised up to 37%, as it says right here, which is truly astonishing for that period of time. And you'll see women are going to continue to propel themselves up in terms of work equality and such throughout history, and we're still trying today. Obviously, our iconic propaganda piece that we see here with Rosie the Riveter saying, "We can do it," showing that women can do the same things men can do the same jobs, trying to convince women that they're just as good and can do those same jobs, convincing them to join the workforce. You see women working on bombers here, different parts of the planes. These photos have been recolored, and the United States would not be able to do it without them. They are also going to receive what we call equal pay for equal work. Companies are not going to be able to pay women less money because they're women. And the United States still has a problem with that today in 2020 in some areas of the country. So women in the workforce during World War II were ahead of their time. Let's talk about rationing and ration coupons. Just like World War I, Americans are going to be asked to ration, which again meant save, conserving, limiting things. And because a lot of goods, were scarce or limited, or there weren't a lot of them, they were rare during World War II. So things that were rationed or saved because they were rare, different meats, sugars, fish, butter, canned goods, these foods are going to be sent en masse to soldiers overseas. So at home, Americans need to eat less of these goods, so there's more to send to those troops. Different metals for weapons and vehicles are going to be needed, so Americans can't buy as much of this stuff. Gasoline for all those planes, bombers, tanks, jeeps, you name it, firewood, coal, shoes, all sorts of things. And to make sure Americans actually saved these resources, they would often need ration coupons. So if you went to the store, you would need money and a coupon for usually food. Ration coupons would be given out for. So like it says here, if you didn't have this coupon, you couldn't get your 5 pounds of sugar. You could see it for gasoline as well. You couldn't just drive as much as you wanted. They would actually force you to use these coupons at times. Again, this was to make sure that everyone got some of these scarce goods, these rare goods, to make sure that there was a fair distribution of them. So someone couldn't go in and buy all the meat in the store and no one else got any. It had to be fair. We talked about victory gardens as well. Remember, to encourage Americans to save food, we're going to ask them to grow their own fruits and vegetables in their gardens, their backyards, wherever. Make sure those soldiers have enough food. And the Office of War Information is going to create lots of propaganda to convince Americans to do things. The office that creates it is going to be called the OWI. You see right here, food is a weapon, don't waste it, convincing Americans to ration or grow victory gardens. Volunteer and choose your branch of service, convincing Americans to enlist or volunteer for the armed forces. Do the job he left behind, convincing women to join the factories to engage in wartime production. Buy war bonds to help pay for the war and support the troops. When you ride alone, you ride with Hitler. Join a car sharing club, trying to convince people to save gas by driving with multiple people in the car, not just by themselves. Otherwise, you're kind of supporting the enemy because you're wasting resources. Avenge December 7th when America was attacked at Pearl Harbor by the Japanese, just trying to get them to do pretty much all of these things to remember that day. There's more here. So other types of propaganda that would be created, there were newsreels, different radio shows would come out. You see cartoons. You literally had Disney creating propaganda for children, showing Hitler was a bad person. Different posters, movies, as we talked about. And the war also ended the Great Depression for the most part. So as all of these men, 16 million men are joining the war, they're getting paid. They have jobs. They're able to send money home for their families. Their families can live in homes again, leave those Hoovervilles if they're still there. They can buy food. They can support their families. Women also are getting money, making money, getting jobs, causing the unemployment rate to go down. The economy is growing. So World War II really pushes America and the world out of the Great Depression. So that's what's going on in the home front. Those are some effects and some things that Americans are doing to help support the United States and the Allies during World War II. Thanks, guys.